Welcome everyone watching all over the world, God willing. We're in a secret hideout here. We are not broadcasting from Yerushalayim like we usually do. And in fact, many of you have gotten the various newsletters or WhatsApps or whatever that, at least for right now, after a number of years with virtually no breaks, the first Sunday of the month English year is not continuing. This happens to be one Sunday before, so we are hoping that in some way, shape, or form, English classes will continue and will be broadcast all over the world. But for right now, we're coming towards the end of a year. Rosh Hashanah is not all that far away. And something new is going to happen. We just can't tell you yet exactly what that will be. So all of you who have been loyal to watching these broadcasts and those who have been coming regularly to Yerushalayim, we thank you very much. And like I said, we do hope that English Shiurim will continue. Everyone who's getting the emails and the WhatsApps will be informed in plenty of time. Tonight we have a dedication for Aliyat Neshama for Anshel Yeshua ben Shmuel. Should have an Aliyat Neshama. And also for Rabbi Chaim David Nota ben Nachum Dav Vichnin, whose yahrzeit was on the 26th of Tammuz. Tonight is his yahrzeit. So he should also have an Aliyat Neshama. The Rav will be here shortly. And as we usually do, we try to give over some Torah while we wait for the Rav to come. We do hope we'll be within a few minutes. So let's say something about the 3 weeks. There's a lot to say about the 3 weeks. But let's start with a Torah from the Baal Shem Tov that the Rav gives over constantly, is that for every spiritual and material process, there are 3 stages: Hachna'ah, Havdalah, and Hamtakah. Hachna'ah is submission, Havdalah is separation, and Hamtakah is sweetening. So the Rav explained, we already did Mevarchim HaChodesh for Chodesh Av, this Shabbos. Rosh Chodesh is on Friday. So he explained that this process works perfectly for the months of Av, Elul, and Tishrei. The month of Av, as we can understand, is Hachna'ah, submission. This is, if we could say such a thing, it's the low point of the year. So much so that we literally sit on the floor. And that's really the low point, and that represents Hachna'ah. Elul represents Havdalah. Why? It's during Chodesh Elul that we are making the clarifications, the distinctions, the separations between what we want to do, what we should do, what we will do, and all those things that maybe we didn't fix. So it's a time of clarification, of separation. And then, of course, Chodesh Tishrei is Hamtakah, is sweetening. And even though Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur called Yamim HaNoraim, Yira, but anyone who goes to a Hasidic shul on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the davening is beyond the beyond. The joy is amazing, so much that the Mishnah says that there were no days as joyous as Tu B'Av and Yom Kippur. So Sukkot, of course, is a sweetening. Hoshana Rabbah, Simchas Torah. But the whole month, even Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is a sweetening. Why? Because we're doing tshuva, and we're receiving from Hashem atonement, kapara. What could be more joyous? So this is a Torah from Rabbi Ginsburgh to understand the flow that we're about to enter into is hachna'ah, havdalah, and then hamtakah. Another beautiful Torah, this is from the Slonim Rebbe, where he explains that, and Rav Ginsburgh gives us over all the time also, that between Yud Zayin B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, there's exactly 22 days. Aleph ad Tav. And in fact, Rav Ginsburgh taught that when we do Tachanun, and we do Ashamnu, Beganu, Gedalnu, etc., it's all according to the Aleph Bet, Aleph ad Tav. And so every day during the 3 weeks is one of those fixings. But the Slonim Rebbe points out that there's another cycle in the Jewish year that also has 22 days. That is Rosh Hashanah through Simchas Torah in Eretz Yisrael. Outside, there's Shmini Atzeret and then Simchas Torah. But in Eretz Yisrael, there's exactly 22 days. So the Slonim gave over a beautiful mashal. And he said that when an artist draws a picture, first they will do the outline. And then later they color it in. So he explained that these 22 days is actually the outline for the coming year. And then the 22 days from Rosh Hashanah through Simchas Torah is coloring in the picture. So what we learn from this is, just like darkness comes before light, Vahi Erev, Vahi Voker, Yom Echad. Darkness comes before light. The breaking of the vessels in the previous world, Olam HaTohu, comes before Olam HaTikun. So this is the idea that the outline for the coming year is really how deep we can understand the exile that we're in, on a personal level, on a national level. For every tear that we cry during the 3 weeks, that is where the joy comes from in the 22 days from Rosh Hashanah through Simchas Torah. And the Rav just came. We just finished the Torah, so perfect timing.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're in the middle of the 3 weeks. So we'll devote ourselves to different topics that pertain to the Beis HaMikdash and to the how we should be involved in bringing the Geula, bringing Mashiach. We say in our prayers that that because of our transgressions we've been exiled from our land, meaning that we're responsible for the sad state that the Jewish people is still in, that the temple's not built, the Redeemer is not here. The world in general is still not in its ideal state. There's suffering in reality. So the first question to ask is, who's to blame? We can maybe say that that's the topic that we're going to discuss today. Who's to blame? The obvious answer is that I'm to blame. And that everybody has to take responsibility for the state of events that we're in, and that we'll call it that meditation, because it definitely is a meditation of I'm to blame, is the meditation of the 3 weeks. There's a famous saying of the sages that any generation that the temple is not built in that generation, it's as though the temple is destroyed in that generation. That's the way it's usually quoted. But in the original, in the Gemara, is that it doesn't say that if the temple is not built in our times, then it's as though it was destroyed in our times. But it says, Kilo hech rivo. It's as though we destroyed it. That's the original. But in Hebrew, to say that it's not built in our times, it's as though it's destroyed in our times. It's called Dor Shelo Nivna Bet HaMikdash Medoro Kilo Necharav, in the passive tense, as though it was destroyed in this time. But the original quote is not like that. The original quote is Kilo Hech Rivo, that the generation that the temple is not built in its time, as though that generation destroyed the temple. In the active tense, not in the passive tense. There are some times that it's quoted not generation, but whoever. Kol mi shebet hamikdash lo nivna bedoro kilo hechribo. Whoever, referring to every individual, not just the generation as a whole, but every individual that the temple is not built in his days. It's as though he destroyed the temple. That's a very strong saying. So that realization or contemplation is a contemplation of this period of time. Go back to the first saying that we said, that because of our sins or transgressions, we have been exiled from our land. What is this sin? Chazal say that the all-inclusive sin for which we're in exile is sinat chinam. The reason that the second temple was destroyed, for hatred between people for no reason. So therefore the tikkun, it's the rectification of sinat chinam, is the very opposite. Meaning that the way to, what we have to do, our tshuva, to bring Mashiach, is to reach a state of ahavat chinam, of free, meaning without reason, unconditional love. Just like the sin was unconditional hatred, So the tikkun is unconditional love. So that's one very basic thing that's said about the way to bring about redemption. To reach a state between ourselves of Ahavat Yisrael, of the love of Israel, which is unconditional. Are there other things that are said about the way to bring about redemption? Is what we have to do, just like pointed at some practical thing that we have to do. So in the Zohar, you probably remember that it says that the way to bring about redemption, b'chesed u'b'rachamim, with kindness and compassion, is through disseminating the teachings of the Zohar itself. It says, "V'hai chibur adidach," and with this composition, this work of yours, so says Rabbi to Rashbi, to the author of the Zohar, Rabbi Shem Baruch Hai, that with your composition, the people of Israel and the whole world will go out of exile, b'rachami, with mercy and compassion. That took on a even deeper meaning and dimension when the Baal Shem Tov, 1,500 years later, asked the Mashiach, "When are you coming?" And the answer was, when your wellsprings will burst and spread forth to the farthest possible extreme. So that's a condition. But for Rashbi, it was that if you want the redemption to be in a way of chesed and rachamim, of kindness and mercy, then you have to disseminate the teachings and the wisdom of the Zohar. Baal Shem Tov was even clearer that the way the Mashiach said, "I'm coming when," meaning when and only when, your teachings, which are also the teachings of the Zohar, and all of the soul, the inner soul of the Torah, the Nishmat HaDoraita, but that will be spread to the outside world, to everyone. So that's number two. So there are many people who think, what do we have to do to bring Mashiach? So what comes to mind first? So for many people, Hasidim especially, what comes to mind is this: that's what we have to involve ourselves with, meaning that also in this time of mourning for the destruction of the temple, we have to try to resolve in ourselves more than ever before that what we can do is to spread the well springs of Hasidut to the world. But another person, what will immediately enter his mind, and also very, very well, is that what we have to do is we have to love one another. It's not the same thing. Obviously it's related. One is related to the other. That the inner soul of the Torah definitely teaches us and tells us to love one another. But again, what do we have to do? What do we have to improve in? Just love. Once more, unconditional ahavat chinam for one another. Doesn't mean going and teaching him Chasidus. Something else. So it appears. Another related thing. Is there a third thing? And what should I say? What do we have to do to bring Mashiach? So the third thing is in the Nigla, in the revealed part of the Torah, that the Rambam says, and the Rebbe always quotes him. Very simply, it says, "Sof Yisrael v'sof Galutan," the end of Israel, the end of the generations before the coming of the Mashiach. Israel will do tshuva. Umiyad hem nigalim. And then immediately, upon doing tshuva, they will be redeemed. Meaning that the redemption depends only on one thing, tshuva. Tshuva, the simple meaning of tshuva is on a personal level, that I have to make an account, a cheshbon nefesh, of what I'm doing wrong. vis-a-vis the teachings of the Torah and the precepts of the Torah, and fix myself. And if everybody thinks what I'm not doing right and regrets having done wrong, that's called charata balev, then as mekabel, he decides never more to do that wrong deed, then, and he lives upon his promise to himself, to the extent that Rambam says that Hashem himself, God, will testify to his sincerity, that he's never ever going to do that wrong thing again. And that's the way to bring Mashiach. That's the pshat. That's the halacha. To do Mashiach, just everybody has to do tshuva. Tshuva means indeed. That's more. Sit down, like most people do, should be doing it before Rosh Hashanah. Sit down and write down everything I've done wrong, but every night you do it before going to sleep. And make a decision that I'm going to be, tomorrow morning when I wake up, I'm going to be a new person. What's the relation between these three things that we said? One thing is when is Mashiach going to come? When is the temple going to be rebuilt? What do we have to do? One thing is spread the light of the inner soul and light of the Torah. Number two is just love one another unconditionally. That's the rectification of the sin for which the temple was destroyed. That's the only way to rebuild the temple. If it's just loving one another, that's not making a cheshbon nefesh, an account of if I didn't daven today at the right time, according to Shulchan Aruch, and every other, even slight transgression that I did. Or just al pi nigle, the pshat, that we have to do tshuva. The simple meaning of tshuva is personal, a personal taking of account and regret and decision to be good. We also speak of what's called public tshuva. Public tshuva is a decision, it's also a regret of the state, the public, we will even call it the political state of our present being, and the public making a decision that we're going to do it right. We're going to have a state according to the precepts of the Torah. That's called public tshuva, which is a public consciousness. It's one of the simple pshat of tshuva is personal tshuva, but there's also a public tshuva. These three ideas correspond to the three lower worlds in Kabbalah. And this is not going to be the topic. We're going to see several parallel triplets that correspond to the rectification of the three lower worlds. Clearly, to bring Mashiach, to bring redemption, we have to change our state of consciousness. Our mindset has to transform, has to metamorphosize. Just like the Rebbe would always say that we have to be able to open our eyes and see Mashiach's here. It's a total change of perception of reality. How do we achieve that? How do we change our state of consciousness? That's the rationale behind all of the inner soul of the Torah, to see reality with inner eyes. It's what to actually see Mashiach. The Rashbi, or maybe we'll explain it more, the author of the Zohar says that the temple for him was never destroyed. he was in a state of consciousness that the temple was still here. So you can ask the question, did he fast on Tisha B'Av or not? The temple was never destroyed. So if it was just up to him, he wouldn't have to fast on Tisha B'Av, because it wasn't. But since he's part of the people, he's part of us, so he also mourned. He mourned for our state of consciousness. And because he mourned for our state of consciousness, he wrote, for that very reason he composed the Zohar, to transform our consciousness to his consciousness, his perception of reality, which is a different perception of reality than our perception. The world of Briah, it says, it's mostly good and just a little bad. The next, let's go to the world of creation, the highest of the three lower worlds. Three lower worlds means the worlds that there is self-consciousness, not purely divine consciousness. So the highest of those three levels is creation, the world of creation. And the world of creation is mostly good, a little bad, and it can be defined as the world of perception of reality. So the good of that world is perceiving reality correctly. The bad of that world is living in an illusion. So we call that world of creation the world, since these are the three lower worlds and all of them have some bad, as they descend it's more and more bad versus in proportion to the less and less good. So they have to be rectified. That's what we're here to rectify. So the world of Atzilut, above those three worlds, the world of emanation is already rectified. God, Hashem, rectified it at the beginning of creation. But he left us to rectify the three lower worlds. Creation, formation, action. That's the name. In the very simplest terms, it's mind, emotion, and deed, action. The mind has to be rectified, the mindset. The emotion has to be rectified, and the deed has to be rectified. So now it becomes very clear that these are the three things that we said before. Rectifying the mind is rectifying the way that we perceive reality. That we should see the true world in front of us. Not live in an illusion. It's much more as reality or perception versus illusion. That's the world of creation. The world of the next world of Yetzirah is a world of emotion. Most often in Chassidut we're taught that the two basic emotions are love and fear. But as we'll explain, and also taught in various places in Chassidut, the two basic emotions are love and hatred. Either you love or you hate. It says that the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, is half-half, 50-50, 50% good, 50% bad. So if love is good and hate is bad, it's 50% love and 50% hate. But not always is hate bad. Hate seems like the worst, the very worst emotion. But at the same time it says that Ohavei Hashem Sinu Ra, those that love Hashem shall hate evil. And Hashem himself. Does Hashem hate? So it says that Halo Ach Esav Yaakov, that Esav is the brother of Jacob. God says, it's verily Esav is the brother of Jacob, and Jacob I love, and Esav I hate. That same Esav that God hates, Yitzchak Avinu loved him more than Yaakov. It says in the future, Yitzchak Avinu will be the primary father, patriarch. Ata Avinu. The fact that these are two brothers already represents a half-half situation, 50%. So if it's Hashem himself, it's 50% of Hashem's emotional, call it energy of Hashem, emotive energy, is loving Jacob, and the other 50% is hating Esau. Just like the verse implies, that if you love Hashem, you hate evil. How does the Alter Rebbe in Tanya describe a perfect, a consummate tzaddik? He says that a consummate tzaddik is one who loves God consummately and hates evil consummately. He defines the tzaddik by hatred, just as he defines him by love. Nonetheless, we will still say that hatred is a bad quality in general, and love is a good quality. And once more to bring this is obviously the world, that in order to rectify this world of Yetzirah, that's what we said before, is through unconditional love. So once more, the world of Briah, the rectification of that world of creation is through spreading the well springs of the Torah, of Chassidut, of the Zohar, which is in order to change perception, to perceive reality, to enter into the eyes of Rashbi and all of the great tzaddikim. How do great tzaddikim perceive reality? They see that reality, they see the table and everything that's on the table, but they see it all as the clothing of God. As explained in Tanya, God is a very, very exclusive wardrobe of clothings. He's also always changing his clothing. Poshet tzura velovesh tzura is the idiom. But it's all clothing. And he senses, he doesn't actually see that who is enclothed within, but he does sense definitely that what I see is clothing. And then that changes his whole perception of the world that he's living in. And maybe at a certain point, God himself will a little bit strip off the clothing. We'll be able to see him directly. That's the redemption. Ayin ba'ayin yiru b'shuv Hashem Zion. That eye by eye we will see God directly. Takes off his clothing. Lo yechaseh ot morecha. That's another verse. That your master will not be enclothed anymore. You will be able to see him directly. But now, all of us, definitely not just the tzaddikim, but every one of us should see reality in this way. That everything that is present and everything that happens in our experience is all just a clothing, an expression, an outer expression of Hashem. How do we reach that? That's what, for that reason we learn Chassidut and try to teach and spread Chassidut. Is there another way to say reality versus illusion, or perception versus illusion, which is we're now defining the world of Briah, of creation? So we could say in this even a simpler way that it's knowledge versus ignorance. That's why the world of creation is a world of Torah in general. If a person is ignorant, so in a certain sense he's living in an illusion. Knowledge is perception. Is there another way to say socially the same thing? Knowledge versus ignorance. We could say literacy versus illiteracy. As we now just said that the world is clothing. There's another way to say it. The world is a text. A book. Some people know how to read the text. They're literate. Other people are illiterate. They're ignorant. They don't know how to read. They don't know how to read the text of reality. If they don't know how to read the text, then they're living in an illusion. So once more, all of the inner teaching of the Torah is to make us literate to the text of reality, to make us knowledgeable, and to make us perceptive of true reality, the way reality really is, what is really here and what is really happening. But that's all the world of creation. The world of formation, we said that's emotions, and the two sides of emotion is love versus hatred. In order to bring Mashiach, we have to emphasize the love so much that it's unconditional. Ahavat Yisrael. What is the world of Asiyah? Go to the lowest world. The lowest world is the world of action, of deed. The verse says, Bara'ati v'yitzarti v'af asiti, I've created them, I have formed them, even I have made them. So that even cuts off the world of Asiyah, of deed, of action, from the two worlds above it, implying that there's a concealment, a masach, a curtain, between the two worlds of mind and emotion, and then some curtain, or parsa it's called, and the lowest world, which is the world of deed. And the world of deed, obviously, that's the third concept, thing that we said in the beginning about how to bring Mashiach. We have to do tshuva. Tshuva means correcting our deeds, that's all. Just getting our trip together and doing it right. Everything, from the moment that we wake up in the morning to the moment that we go to sleep at night, and even at sleep. We have to do it. The mentality is, what am I doing wrong? I have to start doing it right. Everything is consciousness. Love is also consciousness. It's conscious of all the three worlds. We said before that if the question is, who's to blame, then in these 3 weeks, the answer has to be, I'm to blame. So what is that? In which of these three worlds is that? That's at the lowest world. Amaisva Ikar, the world of action. Simply, certainly I can be to blame that I don't see things correctly, or I'm to blame that I don't love people enough. But the simple, I'm to blame that I destroyed the temple. That's a traumatic experience to think that I destroyed the temple. Who's responsible for the Holocaust? It's like something which is so mind-blowing that but most people, or even 99.99% of people, could never psychologically accept responsibility. What is another word for responsibility and blame? The word is guilt. What is the world of action? The world of action is the world of guilt versus innocence. It's a sense of either I'm guilty, like ploniata chaya ploniata. So in every mishpat, in every judgment, two people are rivaling one against the other, and the final psak, the final decision of the judges has to say to one that you're guilty and you're innocent. That's the world of Asiyah. That you're either guilty or innocent, and if I'm guilty, then that's a big responsibility, a big blow to my ego. And once more, if the trauma of being guilty is too much to handle, too much to cope with, I cannot psychologically cope with my guilt. So what do? I repress it. I forget it. Repression is the defense mechanism of the world of Asiyah, because the guilt is too much to psychologically handle. It says that if there would be one tzaddik, this the Rebbe quotes in the last Ma'amar Hasidut discourse that he gave out to the Hasidim, to all of us. It's called Adat Zaveh. He quotes also a very tremendously strong idea. He says that if even one person would do 100% tshuva, that would bring Mashiach. Just one person. What does it mean for one person to do 100% tshuva? Why should that bring Mashiach? It must mean that that one person is taking responsibility for all the wrong that's in the world. That he's guilty. That's exactly the way Mashiach is described in chapter 53 in Isaiah. Just one person would accept responsibility for the whole state of exile that we're in. That's enough to bring Mashiach. But once more, for all of us, that's too much to handle. So the world of Asiyah, the majority is bad, the minority is good. The world of Yetzirah, formation, is 50-50. The world of creation is mostly good and a little bad. Also, the defense mechanism of Asiyah, the world of Asiyah, is repression. Because guilt cannot be handled, especially a lot of guilt. The defense mechanism of Yetzirah, of the world of formation, is called in psychology projection. Projection means that I project my negative feeling on somebody else. We're now using a term, a psychological term that probably most of us heard. It's called a defense mechanism, the way that the psyche deals once more with things that it cannot cope with at its normative level. The healing, which is the redemption of the soul, is to be able to cope. So all of this is we have 3 weeks to learn how to cope within the 3 worlds. These 3 weeks correspond to the 3 worlds that we're now discussing. And how to deal with the wrongs of the three worlds. The wrong of the world of creation is illusion. The wrong of the world of Yetzirah is hatred. And the wrong of the world of Asiyah is guilt, but not being able to accept the guilt. And we'll see guilt is a very important concept. We'll even say something more. How do we know that this whole period is about guilt? About feeling guilt? Because there are 22 days in this period of the 3 weeks. And the scroll of Echav, Lamentations, that we say on Tisha B'Av, is all based on the 22 letters of the alphabet. And the reason for which is, as the sages teach us, that our sins, we blemish the 22 letters, just like before we said, that reality is a text. And some people know how to read the text, and other people don't know how to read the text. In our misdeeds, we blemish those 22 letters of the text. I mean, that we ourselves become illiterate, make ourselves illiterate. We not able to read the letters. We blur the text. So what is the rectification? The rectification is confession, it says. In the Torah, the practical element of doing tshuva is confessing, vidui. Why? What does confession have over just deciding one's heart never to do wrong again? One of the deep meanings of confession is that confession, expressing in words, brings to the fore of the consciousness forgotten things, meaning repressed memories. That without confessing in words, I will never manifest those repressed memories that I was unable to cope with, especially in this afasit, even the lower world of even I have made it. What is the first word of the vidui, of the confession? The first word is it's a general, all the words afterwards, it goes according to the alphabet, because the intention is to rectify the blemishes of the alphabet. So the first word, which begins with an aleph, is Ashamno. We are guilty. All the other words are relatively details, specifics, what we did wrong. But the first word is the general state and confession that we are guilty. That's the first day of the 3 weeks. All of the 3 weeks, once from the 22 days, inclusive of the first day and the last day, there are 22 days, are actually each day we intend on one of the 22 letters in the confession of Hashamna Bagad. Today is Chamasno. To live with the times. Today is Chamasno. Chamasno means to steal, or to covet and steal. Once more, it all follows the first word, Hashamno. Just the general state of guilt. That's the rectification, once more, the rectification of Asiyah, of the lowest world. So once more, we are talking about, we mentioned now different defense mechanisms. How many are there in psychology. So nowadays, if you open up a psychology book, you'll see there are tens. In one place there are 31, they list 31 different defense mechanisms. But it all began with 3. And all of them, even the 3, are all the same. They have a very, very common denominator. The 3 are denial and projection and repression. What's more, denial and projection and repression. And actually they're all 3 different types of denial. Simple denial means that you deny that it ever happened. Just deny that something happened. Some traumatic experience, something so traumatic that once more you cannot cope with the reality. What happened? Some tragedy, chas v'shalom, happened. Not just guilt, something that you cannot handle psychologically. So you simply deny it. It didn't happen. Projection is that I projected on somebody else. That's also denial. It's denying responsibility. It's denying that it happened, but I didn't do it. I'm not responsible. Repression is also a type of denial. It's denying it in the sense that I just remove it from my consciousness. Unconsciously I remove it from my consciousness. If I consciously remove it from my consciousness, means I suppress it. That's called suppression. There's the difference between suppression and repression. Whether the removal from the consciousness is itself a conscious effort, whether it just takes place unconsciously because I can't handle the situation. But everything has its origin in the Torah. The basic example that's given for projection in the world of Yetzirah is that I dislike someone. The world of Yetzirah much more is a world of emotion. I dislike someone or hate someone, and since my conscience tells me that that's not a good feeling, it's not a good emotion, so I project that on that very person that I dislike, and I build an image that he hates me, and that's what I say, he hates me. That's the basic example that's always used. So in the world of Yetzirah, the dichotomy is that of love versus hatred. This is a classic example. All of these so-called defense mechanisms, they're all sayings of the sages, or explicit verses in the Torah, which is a very important topic that somebody should write a whole book or essay on, just finding all of the sayings of the Torah, which are exactly just the last 100 years of these as though some new discovery of America, that psychologically the person is always using these mechanisms, the defense mechanisms, to once more to defend his ego, to defend himself. So this one is so obvious that it's even a verse in the Torah. In the beginning of Dvarim Deuteronomy, it says, "V'sinat Hashem otanu," that we, after the spies returned and gave the bad tidings of what they saw, what they thought that they saw, It's also a classic example of illusion, of seeing reality wrong. The sin of the spies. So the people said, it says there, it's B'sinat Hashem otanu, hotzi otanu me'eretz Mitzrayim, latet otanu, biyad ha'emori la'ashmidenu. That because Hashem hated us, out of the hatred of Hashem for us, did He take us out of the land of Egypt to hand us over to the Amorites to destroy us. So what does Rashi say there? Rashi is Pishut Hosha Mikra. What does it mean in the hatred that God hated us? Rashi says that that's purely a defense mechanism, a public defense, because the people hated God because of what they heard from the spies. So unable to recognize and acknowledge and confess that we hate God, they said that God hates us. It's like 100% exactly the way it's described in so-called modern psychology. There's even a statement that says for that. What you feel about your companion is what you say your companion feels about you. An explicit saying of the sages. So where does that take place? That takes place in the world of Yitzhak. That has to be rectified. All has to do with conviction. All of these are related to one another. It's all different forms of denial, and it all has to be reconciled through proper confession. Confession is acknowledgement. In the world of creation, I have to acknowledge reality as it is, not as I misbelieve it is. In the world of Yitzhak, I have to acknowledge my true emotions, not cover up my true emotions by projecting them on somebody else. In the world of asiyah, of action, I have to acknowledge my deeds and to confess my wrongs at the simplest level. What is that acknowledging and confession coming from? It's coming from the word hod. It says at the beginning of our service of Hashem is the midah, the attribute of hod. It means either glory or acknowledgement or confession. In the world of Atzilut, it's glory, and when it descends into the lower worlds, it becomes acknowledgement. And when it descends to the very lowest world, a simple confession of wrong. So we're taking it to that one tzaddik, that if he would do 100% shuvah, that would be sufficient to bring the Mashiach. Let's give two examples of our tri-part understanding now of the lower worlds, and how, especially in this period of 3 weeks, which correspond to the three lower worlds, we should be rectifying. One is what we usually refer to as that verse that is the foundation of what we call Torah HaNefesh in general, the psychology, Torah psychology, or Hasidic psychology in general. The verse reads, first of all, let's go back to why do people repress things? Because they just begin to sense something, and it becomes a source of anxiety. And people don't want to live with anxiety, so they have to have defense mechanisms in order to either avoid anxiety or alleviate anxiety. That's the thing behind all of the defense mechanisms, to avoid or to alleviate anxiety. What's the basic verse for that in the Torah? The verse is Da'aga b'levi shashchena, davar tov yisamchena, that if a person has anxiety is worry. Da'aga b'levi, if there is a worry in the heart of man, yashchena. What does that word mean, yashchena? So the simple meaning of yashchena is suppress, not repress, suppress. Put it down. Which means a conscious effort to suppress it, suppress the anxiety. But the sages read that word, that's the pshat of the word in the Torah, but the sages read that word in two various readings, two different readings. One is Yesichena min hadat, to take one's mind off it, to forget it. It's not to suppress it. It's to take it out of one's mind. How do I do that? So sometimes the answer is do that by just putting your mind into something else altogether. Like the Rebbe would always say, put your mind into the Torah study and forget about your worries. But really, that's more like repression. Once more, the first pshat is active, as it were, suppression of the worry, of the anxiety. The second is more something that you do in order that it disappears, that the anxiety disappears. Where does it disappear? Into it. It disappears into the unconscious. What's the third thing? The third thing is, Chazal read it in another way, that Da'aga b'levish yesichena la'acharim. Yesichena also means to converse. If you have a worry, an anxiety, tell it to somebody else. And it says, tell it to somebody who loves you, a true lover, a true friend. Reveal it. That true friend obviously nowadays can be a counselor. It's also a form of confession. But it's just, here it's not actually so much confessing as sharing. Share it. Share your worry with somebody who is so empathetic with you that he will hear you, and when he will hear your worry that you share with him, actually he'll take off. Just by hearing your worry, he'll take off 50% of the weight from you of that worry. And then the verse continues to read, "V'davar tov yisamchena," that he'll also have something good to say back, to put it in a positive light, to see it in a more realistic, truly realistic way that will convert it, transform it into happiness. Davar tov yisamchena, that's the conclusion of the verse, which particularly pertains to the interpretation that it means to converse and give over, share your worry with another loving soul, that himself can take off part of the world. In our three worlds, where would that be? That would be in the world of Yetzirah. Much more. Simply suppressing it is a form of denial, of conscious denial. It's almost like negating it. It's negation. It's a form. Much more, all of these different mechanisms have myriad forms, how they manifest themselves. But a form of denial is either negating its very reality, and it's an illusion, it didn't really happen. When we said before that Rashbi for Rashbi, the temple was never destroyed, that's a positive form of denial. It never happened. So maybe you should call the people in the white coats over to it. All of these things can most often are bad, but sometimes they can be very good. If I tell over my worries to a really good friend who I can share my feelings with, so that's a positive form of projection. I take a little out of myself and give it to him. And we're not two partners in this. And since he empathizes with me, he accepts a part of this feeling, which is a bad feeling. Once more, I can't cope with it. The person who had talked about all these different mechanisms, he himself said that denial is the beginning of coping. It's a quote. The denial is the beginning of coping. So every coping has to begin with some form of denial. So what did we now just say? We said that this our basic verse of the Torah Nefesh of Torah psychology has three readings to it. And the three readings themselves can be seen to correspond to the level of mind, which is the power of the mind to suppress and to negate or deny reality seen from a certain perspective. No, it's not like that. It didn't really happen like that. The second is to be able to much more of it's positive, is to connect and to share a negative, another word that we didn't yet say is shame. Very often a shame, a shameful feeling that I am ashamed to have this feeling, to be able to share my shame with someone else, and then both of us we take once more the weight goes off myself by sharing it with another person who is willing to accept. That's a positive form of projection. And then there is the interpretation of in some way forgetting it. Hesach hadat, releasing it from consciousness, which is repression. So in psychology, in secular psychology, they talk about two types of repression. It's called primal repression and repression proper. It's the terms that they use. The primal repression is repression before I know it. Before it becomes conscious. Repression proper is after it becomes conscious. Hesach hadat. It says Mashiach will only come behesach hadat. Meaning there must be something good also about repression, about hesach hadat. In many, many letters to people, what now comes to my mind is especially to women that wrote to the Rebbe about anxiety. So always the Rebbe would just say Hesach Hadat, which is repression, positive repression at the level of the world of Asiya, of action, of Avasitiv. I will say, we'll give another very important source for the three worlds. In the prophet Micha, there's a verse which is so important that probably everybody knows that it's written, I think, in the UN and many other places. The verse, that Hashem has told you, man, what is good and what does God require from you. Kim asot mishpat v'avat chesed v'atznei lechet im Elokecha. Do judgment and love kindness and walk humbly with God, with your God. And so those three things, three pillars of morality, we'll call it, very clearly correspond to the three worlds. The first one, from bottom up, the first one is asot mishpat, which is the word asiyah, to do, hamaseh ha'ikar, do judgment. In Chassidut, judgment is knowing how to judge yourself, to judge my deeds, my goods and my vices and evils. Once more, in judgment, always one comes out guilty and one comes out innocent. In myself, I have that innocent part of myself, but in the world of Asiya, I'm mostly guilty. That's called asot mishpat. The next principle is ahavat chesed, love, kindness. So that's obviously the world of love. It's very clear, these three sayings. The world of love is the world of Yitzirah. Love, kindness, and obviously from loving kindness one does kindness. It's kind to one another. It all begins from chesed. Chesed is chesed Abraham. The first of the three patriarchs, Abraham, is the pillar of love and kindness. Ahavat chesed. Then comes the world, the highest level, the most sublime saying, part of the saying, which is walk humbly with God. One of the definitions of the world of Bria, of creation, which is the world of mind and perception, is it's called Or Hamir Liatzmo. It's a light which shines inwardly. It's an introverted world. The world of Yitzirah, formation and action, are extroverted worlds, which is called Or Hamir Lezulato. But the introverted world, which means the world in which the light shines inward, like thought versus word and action. So the three worlds are also thought, word, and action. That's why before when we said speaking it out to a friend is at the level of Yitzirah, because it's word. The higher world of these three is Bria, is thought, and thought is inwardly. So that's very clearly the precept of Atznei Lechet im Elokecha, walking humbly with God. Tzniut means that other people don't experience what you're experiencing. You by yourself are meet boded, or in solitude alone with your God. And alone with your God, that apparently is what's necessary in order to open one's eyes to true reality, to the way things really are. Atznei Lechet im Elokecha. We said that the beginning of all denial is in this world of Bria. There's another phrase in Chassidut for the difference between Bria and Yetzirah and Asya. The phrase is that the world of Bria, of creation, is called Efshariyut HaMetziut. It's possible existence, possible reality. The world of Yetzirah is called general reality, and the world of Asya is called particular reality. Those are the three terms in Chassidut. Efshariyut, HaMetziut, Metziut Klalit, Metziut Pratit. So, since the world of Bria is possible existence, it means that reality is fluid. See, seeing things truly, that itself is fluid. So it's very easy in that world to deny apparent reality, because reality is not yet fixed. There's not just one fixed state of being. It can be like this, it can be like this. It's called Efshariyut HaMetziut. Reality itself is fluid. So once more, denial can be wrong. We'll say another thing about our defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms, ways that spoken especially in very modern psychology, can either be pathological, can be sick, can be immature, can be neurotic, neurosis, or it can be mature. 1, 2, 3, 4. Once more. Defense mechanisms psychologically can either be sick, mental illness, can be the way children, immature reactions, psychological reactions. They can be more adult but neurotic. Or they can be mature, good. You said before that there's a list of 31 defense mechanisms. One of them is humility. Another is altruism. A defense mechanism, altruism, humility. In the secular world, this is very, very bad because it makes holy things just profane. But that's the way. And with all of the very, very best attributes that we have can all be just seen as defense mechanisms to defend one's ego, to keep one from having anxiety. Obviously, we believe in God and we believe in the Torah. We believe that there really are good things. Nonetheless, the ones that we just now said, like altruism or humility, they call, you know what I'm saying? They call mature defense mechanisms, positive. There's another thing that they talk about, which is also something clearly from the Torah. It's called sublimation. Sublimation is being able to take things which were repressed or dealt with other defense mechanisms and transform them into what society relates to and refers to as positive things. Once more, a direct saying from the Chazal, from the sages, that if a person was born with a tendency for blood, like in the Mazal Ma'adim, he should become a shochet. If a person was born with a certain affinity to something which naturally might be bad, he can, through sublimation, convert it into something which is good. That's great. That's what Hashem wants from us, to mature and to be able to convert our tendencies into things which are positive, and they still are in accord with our basic nature, state of being. Right, so actually what we did now this evening is we talked about the rectification of the three worlds, how to bring, we all began in this, the Iker, how to bring Mashiach through opening the eyes in virtue of the teaching of Chassidut and disseminating that teaching. How to come to purify our hearts with unconditional love for one another. And how to simply do tshuva, to do tshuva, and to be able to confess, to bring out into the fore of our consciousness things that we repressed because we couldn't cope with. It's all bringing down the thread, we'll call it, the thread of Hod, of Hodaya, into the three lower worlds of perception versus illusion, and love versus hatred, and guilt versus innocence. And that whole, that's the foundation of our service of Hashem. That's why the first thing we say in the morning is Moda'ani lefanecha, I acknowledge, I thank, to give thanks, to express thanks. In the world of a Bria, it's acknowledging truth. The world of Yetzirah, it's expressing thanks. In the world of Asiyah, it's confessing sin. And it all comes from the world of Atzilut, which is simply the glory of God, the glory of Hashem. We'll conclude with Ahavat Yisrael. So we have to, the whole thing should be with a happy tone to it, not that however sad we are, but we have to be happy at the same time. When the king is in exile, the famous parable in Chassidut, that if the king is in exile, we have to be sad. But if he came to visit us, to flee into our little cottage, to be together with us, so that makes us very, very happy. At the same time that we're sad for him and happy that he's with us in his exile. The word asham, guilt, is a very basic root in the Hebrew language, Aleph Shin Mem. In the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, that's attributed to Abraham Avinu, it says the three basic letters are Aleph Mem Shin, which stand for Avir Mayim Esh. It's called the three mother letters. But in the Sfirot of the three higher Sfirot, Keter is called Avir Air, and wisdom is water, and understanding is fire. Emesh. But the word Hashem is the first important permutation of those three letters. It is Aleph Shin Mem, meaning that the order of the letters is Avir, which is once more air, and then fire, and then water. That's the order of the three letters of the word for guilt. Once more, this word is a very, very important word in the Lashon HaKodesh. That permutation, according to Kabbalah, is the one that pertains in the heart to the Sfirah of Yesod, a foundation. That most guilt has to do with that Sfirah in the heart, a foundation, which has to do with with connection between souls, either in a positive way or a negative way, called the covenant, either the correction of the covenant or the blemish of the covenant. That's the order of the three. At the end of Vayikra, the parasha Vayikra, there's a very unique verse. That such a verse appears only one time in the whole Torah. That repeats this root 3 times in 5 words. The whole verse is 5 words. Hasham hu, Hashom, Hasham, Hashem. In the temple service, we have to talk about the temple, about rebuilding the temple. In the temple service, we bring sacrifices. One of the sacrifices is called a guilt sacrifice. Another sacrifice is called a sin sacrifice, chatat. 2 different sacrifices. So there's a verse about the guilt sacrifice, which repeats this word guilt 3 times in 5 words. Asham hu, it is a guilt sacrifice. Ashom Asham, guilty, was he guilty to Hashem? It seems superfluous, all these, the whole verse seems superfluous. Especially the fact that the root is repeated 3 times. It's called a chazoko, 3 times. What is it referring to? What's the difference between a guilt sacrifice and a sin sacrifice? A sin sacrifice, chatat, is that you know that you sinned. A guilt sacrifice is that you're not sure if you sinned. There are 2 pieces of fat in front of it. One is chaylev, which is forbidden, and it's so forbidden that it's a chiyuv karet, which is the very worst spiritual punishment, being cut off, the soul being cut off. But it could just be simple fat, which is permissible. And you have these 2, and you don't know that one of them is chaylev, and you eat one of them, and you don't know which one you ate. So you have to bring a korban hasham, a guilt sacrifice, that maybe I ate the chaylev, which is a chiyuv karet. There's something very unique about this guilt sacrifice with respect to the sin sacrifice that emphasizes the severity of guilt, of unknown guilt, more than known sin. What is the phenomenon? That a sin sacrifice costs only 1 danka, and 1 meya, will say 1 cent. But a guilt sacrifice costs 48 times more. So Rabbeinu Yonah, one of the great Rishonim, says, why is a guilt sacrifice more expensive? 48 times more expensive than a sin sacrifice. And he says that in order to do tshuva for an uncertain event, it has to be much, much deeper, because really it's much more severe than a conscious event. This is a tremendous source in the Torah for the severity, meaning the meaningfulness actually of the unconscious. That the unconscious is 48 times harder to resolve and to rectify than the consciousness. Meaning that exactly what we're now talking about, that guilt has to do with repression. Repression is unconscious. The mechanism itself is an unconscious mechanism. And it pushes things into the unconscious. What's more, it can be very good. It can be so good that Mashiach will only come because of repression. And it's so bad that you have to bring up a guilt sacrifice. If you at least know that maybe it was the wrong thing, Then you have to bring this guilt sacrifice. And then it says this remarkable verse of Hashem Hu, Hashem, 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 repeating the root 3 different times. There are many, many interpretations of this we'll not now go into. But this is just for how important is this for Hashem. The verse before that verse of Hashem Hu, Hashem, Hashem, Hashem says that sacrifice has to be an ayil tamim yevienu. Has to be a pure, unblemished ram of 2 years. Ayil tamim. Every ayil, where does ayil first appear? I'm sure everybody knows in the Torah. In the Akedah of Yitzchak. The ayil was in place of Yitzchak. The sacrifice is called ayil tamim yevienu, and afterwards it says this verse, Hashem Hu, Hashem, Hashem, Hashem. Let's now contemplate. We don't have a board here, but we'll try to do it in our eyes. Write out the 2 words, Ahavat Yisrael. Love of Israel. Ahavat Yisrael. If you write the words in Hebrew, there are 9 letters. Ahavat Yisrael. You'll see that the first and the middle, but the middle letter is the Yud of Yisrael. First is the Aleph of Ahavat, and the last is the Lamed of Yisrael. So the first and the middle and the final letter, which is also an equal distance skipping of letters. Each time you skip over 3 letters, it's Aleph Yud Lamed, which spells the word Ayil. It's the ram. So there's something about Ahavat Yisrael that has to do with Ayil, with the ram. Now let's look at it more. Okay, now we're learning how to read. We're trying to become literate, which is the word of Briah, vis-a-vis the word of Yitzirah, which is Ahavat Yisrael, to know how to read things properly. The middle letter is Yud, and the 2 extreme letters are Aleph and Lamed, which spell Ayil. What about if we take the middle letter and take the 2 proximate letters? 2 letters, the letter before the Yud and the letter after the letter before the Yud is the Tav, and the letter after the Yud is Shin. If we would make these 9 letters into a square of 3 by 3, these 3 letters would be the middle line. The middle line is Tav, Yud, Shin. What is that? Tayish. What's a Tayish? Tayish is a billy goat. Ayil is also Ayil is a male sheep, and Tayish is a male goat. The very first word of the Torah, Breshit, in Kabbalah is read Bara Tayish. He created a billy goat. The very first thing that Hashem created, alluded to in Breshit. Sometimes in the liturgy, that same Ayil of Yitzchak Avinu is referred to as a Tayish, even though a sheep and a goat are 2 different things. For instance, in Korban Pesach, when you bring Korban Pesach, it can either be a sheep or a goat. So sometimes they transform one into the other. So we see vis-a-vis the Akedah Yitzchak, there is a transformation between Ayil and Tayish. Now let's see, to complete the reading of these 2 words about Yisrael, we'll read the remaining letters backwards. We have 2 letters on one side and 2 letters on the other side, and read it backwards. Aleph, Reish, Bet, Hey. We have Ayil and we have Tayish, and then if you read the other letters backwards, you'll have Aleph, Reish, Bet, Hey, which is Arbeh. What is Arbeh? It's locust. Locust is the 8th of the 10 plagues, But where does that word appear first in the Torah, Arbe? Arbe, it refers in the end of the Akedat Yitzchak, that I will increase. The word literally means, as a verb, it means to increase. I will increase your seed infinitely. Arbe equals Yitzchak. The word Arbe equals Yitzchak, which is 8 times Hashem's name. Avat Yisrael is 13 times 73. Ahava itself times wisdom, which is understood in Chassidut to mean that in order to really love Israel, you have to have love and wisdom, which is bitul, simultaneously. Arbe can also be read Aruba. So you know what Aruba means? Aruba either means a chimney or it means the Arubot HaShamayim Niftachu, means the windows of heaven open. Right, by Noach and also when Mashiach will come. The new and infinite insights of the Torah that will be taught, Mashiach is called the windows of heaven opening. And the revelation of light shining into reality, into our world. Arbe locust, Hayel and Atayash are both pure animals. What about locust? Can you eat locust? It says, Chazal say that there are 10 different species of locust, 10 species of locust, of which some are pure and some are impure. Because some of them are chagavim, or grasshoppers, which are pure. They have signs. Also a very unusual word in Hebrew, chagav. How much does chagav equal? Just the pure grasshoppers are called chagavim. Chagav equals 13. Chagav equals, in order to eat chagavim, we have to be teimanim. that have a masoret that they can eat chagavim still. But according to the Torah, they're pure chagavim. Chagav equals ahava, equals love. 13. The whole phrase Ahavat Yisrael is a multiple of 73 grasshoppers. That's what it equals Ahavat Yisrael. So once we have this phrase that we now see in a very logical way, that the phrase has the hayel, the ram, which is the guilt offering, the hayel tamim. This particular asham that is referred to in this portion is called an asham talui. Asham talui means a suspended guilt offering. Why is it suspended? Because if afterwards you know that you sin for sure, then you have to bring a sin offering, another offering. So it's putting you into limbo, into suspension. That's another indication that it's all unconscious. It's dealing with an unconscious realm of the soul. That phrase, Hasham Talui, the initial letters spell the word et, as do the initial letters of Hayot Tamim. So the initial letters of a pure ram and the initial letters of a suspended sin offering, a guilt offering, are the same. Also in the first verse of the Torah, Reshit bara Elokim et. The beginning God created et, Aleph Tav. Hayot Tamim, Hasham Talui. Et Hashemayim be'et haaretz. Okay, that was just to make things happy at the end, and also that Ahavat Yisrael, you have to identify with all the ones born, they're all pure species, and we should come to unconditional Ahavat Yisrael. That's the way that Mashiach will come, together with the other things we said. So all of these days should be turned from it says from agony into simcha, and from anxiousness and anxiety into just pure light and joy with the coming of Mashiach. It's odd.